I'm a cafe au lait girl too.
Half and half.
It's great.
We should all show our mugs. Well, I'm sure
There we go, yes.
I'll start by saying good morning with our coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's about time we can say good morning. I think that it's going live. So yes, we all have our coffee, and I hope that you have yours. And let us know. Okay, Courtney says we sound good.
Oh, good.
Good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, everybody.
We should probably just do a short little introduction just to catch everybody up. I don't know if everyone had a chance to watch the last video or not, but this is kind of a continuation of that conversation because we had so many good questions and so much good feedback. And I know that both Dawn and Jen have written some follow-up articles that are also great. And so if you continue to have questions, just pop those in the chat box, and Courtney will get them to us. And we'll have more fun talking, more planning. So, Jen, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. My name is Jennifer Mcintosh, and I write at my blog, wildflowersandmarbles.com. I've been married 23 years to a fantastic guy, Rob, and we have 5 kids from 19 down to 2. So we're a home educating family. So it's a full day and a fun day, and planning is sort of a passion, planning and organizing. So I love to chat about it, and I love to talk about new ideas and way things work, and I like really encouraging others to take ideas and sort of twist them and wrap them around what works for them so that they can make them their own.
Thanks. And Dawn?
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Dawn Hanigan, and my blog is By Sun and Candlelight, and that is dawnathome.typepad.com. And I have been married for 22 years, and I also have kids ranging in age. I have 4 boys, and they are 20, 16, 14, and 2.5. So we have quite a range of kids, and we also have been home schooling for many years now, about 15 years. And like Jen, I love to plan. That's been something I've just enjoyed, and it's been a real passion of mine since I was a little girl. I love to plan for all kinds of aspects of my life, from the home learning to the housekeeping to my own, personal things. And I love to blog about it. I'm always talking about it at my blog. It seems to be a very popular topic, which is great because I love throwing ideas out there and seeing what people think and getting feedback. And I think that chats like these are great because they just really help us all sort of hash this out. And I think that we're all planning because we're trying to make our lives richer for ourselves and for our families. And so this is great. I'm very excited to be here. It's going to be a fun day.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it is. It's kind of one of those things where you want to do the best that you can do. And so, making sure things are written out and your mind is kind of clear about what that is before you can go in and do it is important to do. So I'm Misty Winkler. And my husband and I are both second-generation homeschoolers, and we have 5 kids. We've been married for, it'll be 15 years in a few months, and we have 5 kids from 12, and he's in 7th grade, homeschooled all the way, 12, 10, 8, almost 6, and 3 are ours. So, and I blog at simplifiedorganization.com and also simplyconvivial.com. So... and also simplifiedpantry.com, but I have too many blogs. But writing about things does help me think through them. So it's
Yes.
like I can think through it if I write about it, so I might as well publish what I write. So we were going to start today because one of the main questions that we received was, can Jen talk a little bit more about planning as hospitality? And I thought that was a great way to start out because it kind of gives focus and reason for our plans. So Jen, could you tell us more about what you mean by planning being hospitality?
Sure. I think when we think of planning, we typically think of getting a bunch of lists down on paper and being super efficient and getting everything done, and our homes are going to be this wonderful, organized, sort of controlled chaos, if we're realistic about it. And I think maybe it's helpful to think of it in a sort of a big picture way. And I guess one of the best ways to begin to talk about it is if we think about the story in the Bible of Mary and Martha, because it's really kind of an excellent example of hospitality. And Martha's sort of frittering about, and you can actually imagine her trying to set the table and clean up, and we have this amazing guest here in front of us, and what can we do to make things just perfect? I forgot to dust the corners. And there's Mary at his feet. And I'm Mary and Martha at the same time a lot. And yeah, I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later, our different temperaments or how we just sort of naturally respond to things. But I tend to focus on the doing and not the person. And our Lord was very clear when he said, Martha, Martha, you worry about so many things. Mary's found the one thing needful. So I think if we begin to be Mary a little bit more and find Christ in our husband and our children, we can begin to see that hospitality is serving Christ in our family. And then as we do that, you consider that hospitality is really just exercising kindness and courtesy and a way to make your home a warm and inviting place. And usually you think of hospitality and you think of preparing things for your guests, but do we ever really prepare for our family? What does that communicate if we're just kind of, you know, schlepping through the day willy-nilly at home, and yet we have a guest coming over and we're just, you know, the house is never cleaner than 15 minutes before the guest arrives. So I think in that way, if you begin to think of hospitality as an extension of service, the service that you offer to your family, and also to yourself, we're to take care of ourselves as well. So those personal goals that you list in your planner, simple cleaning chores, realistic, nothing crazy, just realistic stuff. How you tackle the day, the things that you want to do with your family, and how will you serve them through the day, through the month, through the season and the year. So thinking of those things, giving them thought, is a way of stewarding your time, being a good steward of the gift of time, and exercising that hospitality. So that is how I like to think about it. And it helps me, since my own tendency is to think of tasks and checking and doing, it really helps me to try to find the balance between Mary and Martha. I don't know if do you guys know who Audrey Assad is? Have you ever heard of Audrey Assad? She's a fantastic Catholic artist. She's got several albums, and she has a song. She says, I'm Mary and Martha all at the same time. And I love that song. It really does sort of encompass the struggle and the balance we all try to achieve in hospitality.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I have felt that before too, where it's like, okay, we clean for other people, and right, you know, make all this, you know, great food or dessert or whatever when we have other people in, and but my priority, or the people who should come first, are my own family.
Right, exactly. And it kind of works too if you think of your husband as well. You know, you could look nice for him. You don't have to go crazy, but you could put on a little lip gloss and maybe a little perfume before he comes home in the afternoon. It just sort of communicates to him that, you know, I love you all the time, and I make a gift of myself to you all the time, in all the little ordinary moments of the day. So
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that gives us good focus and reason for why we're doing it, and that'll affect what we plan and how we look at our plan and how we use our plan, if that's our reason for doing the plan in the first place. It's not, you know, getting myself to these things that I want to be or do. It's the service focus.
That's exactly right. And it also helps in that mentality of, oh my goodness, I only checked off 2 things today, and I had a list of 16. Well, maybe today was a Mary day, and you needed to be at the feet in service to your children, serving Christ and your children that day. And so having that mentality of, you know, my life is a gift of service, and this is an extension of hospitality, means, okay, well, I exercised hospitality, and this is how it looked today.
Mm-hmm. Or even so many times my plan, you know, has my things that I want to do on it, and then I go through the day feeling like my kids are getting in the way of that plan. It's like, whoa, hold on. That's the reason why I'm here in the first place. Exactly. They are the plan.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So one of the other topics that came up in our last chat, it doesn't look like, I don't see any questions yet, but feel free to add your questions anytime in the chat box. And we'll pause periodically to do them, but I know there's a little bit of a lag, so just pop the questions in anytime you want. But last time we talked just briefly on seasonal or interval, or just planning in chunks of time and different ways to do that. And we all do it a little bit different, and people were asking us to elaborate some more. So, Don, you mentioned seasonal planning. Could you give us a little look at what that looks like and how you break down your seasons? You know, do you name them, and what does that look like for you?
Sure. Yeah, actually, my seasons are a little different. Just that I like to have my seasons as every 2 months. So there's actually 6 seasons for me in the year. That's just the way my brain works. But I've always used the seasons in my planning, even when I was a little girl. It's just been something that I've just naturally done. And when I say seasonal planning, I'm sort of talking about 2 different things, because I'm talking about the household and the home learning and the things that I'm responsible for as a mom, and how I apply the seasons to that sort of planning. And there's a lot to plan. And then also just the seasons themselves and nature as it passes through the year. And every year we get to go through that again and enjoy all those things again. So if I'm talking about how I do seasonal planning, I kind of just have always done it this way, and I have my little things to show here. I start by brainstorming, and I just sit down and I have see if I can get it on my thing here. I have a sheet of paper, and I just start by thinking about the year, and I start going through the seasons, and I just start writing down notes, and I do sort of have it organized in blocks of 12, so I am kind of writing things down. If they fit under 1 month, I'll write it down. And this is just everything that comes to mind, whether it be a holiday or a feast day or a full moon or a meteor shower or somebody's birthday or just a word that pops into my head that, you know, says a certain season to me. I just throw it all down here. I've been doing this for a while, so a lot of it comes to me pretty easily, and I'll just think through the year. But I have a lot of seasonal resources that I use and have used for years, and I love finding new ones. I did a post not too long ago where I sort of listed my favorite ones. I go through my old journals where I've done a lot of note-taking about what we've enjoyed through the year. And I love Pinterest, so I go on Pinterest and I'll just Google in, you know, whatever month I'm working on, or if there's a particular season. And I just keep throwing all those ideas down. And then what I do is I actually add some order to it. So the next thing I do is I take the year and I outline the 52 weeks. And for some people it probably makes more sense to do it by months, because weeks are kind of quick. Someone asked me that at my blog recently. They said, you know, you plan a lot of themes for your weeks, but they go so fast. How do you fit things in? And so months might make sense for someone else, but I have so many things that I want to work into the plan that a weekly theme works for me. And what I do is I write down for each week what's of note that week. So that would be things like a holiday or a feast day, or if there's something in nature that week that I want to make note of, and then anything that's particular for us, a birthday or a family activity. And then what I do is I just start going through and I assign a theme to that. And I know this doesn't make sense for everybody, but this is how I like to do it. I use these themes to plan out. A lot of it is in our home learning, and that's easy to do when they're little, because, you know, when you do apples in September for your little kids, that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of things you can do with them. When they're older, teenagers, they're like, you know, apples, Mom, okay. But this is where it kind of spills over into my family life, where we all can appreciate that apples are in season. So I work it into the family life in general. Maybe we go to an apple orchard on Saturday because that's our family fun day. And that kind of brings me to my next point for the seasonal planning is you need to have a place to have your plans happen. So it's great to come up with all these ideas and all these themes and things that, oh, this is wonderful. This is how I want my spring to look like. Or right now it's winter. I want my winter to happen like this. But you need to be able to create space in your week for it to happen. So what I like to do is I like to look at our family week and see where we have room for things to happen. So if, say, Fridays are a quiet day for us, that might be the day that I'm going to do a craft project, or we might have a baking day, and that is actually our baking day. So what I did was, and I've had different variations of this over the years, but right now this is what I'm using is I have my file crate and I have my file folders, and that's where I store a lot of information. And then through the week, what I have is this is actually one of my file folders, and I have it attached to this clipboard here. This is a really nice clipboard. I got it at Target, and it opens up so I can keep notes inside. And I've clipped my file folder to it. And my file folder, I created these sheets. And just recently I did a post where I shared the printing sheets. They're actually printable now, I should say, which I only just figured out how to turn a document into a PDF and actually share it on my blog. I'm so behind. I've been blogging for a really long time, but I'm still really behind the times when it comes to tech stuff. I was so thrilled when I figured out how to do that. I thought, oh my gosh, I could put these on the blog. I could share these with people. They could print them out. So that was like a real big success for me. So anyway, I have two sheets because the front sheet that I attached to my file folder, and inside the file folder I have any of the paperwork we need for the week. And on the front I have a place to plan the things that sort of apply more to the household and the home and family life. So I have our suppers, and I have the days of note are listed up here. I did write it. This is for next week. So next week our theme is snowflakes. And I came up with that because it's winter. That was one of my winter themes I wanted to work into our family life. But also the feast day for St. Agnes is next week. And I love the concept of there's a flower called St. Agnes's snowflakes. And that's always been something we return to every year. And that's part of it for me, is that a lot of these seasonal activities are things that my kids have done every year in some variation. So I think we're creating some memories here and some traditions that, you know, maybe my boys won't do snowflakes when with their family someday in January, but I think that they'll remember that as a nice family thing, and maybe it'll help them remember that feast day. And then I have a section for crafts and comforts and to-dos, and then this is where I keep my blogging ideas down here. And so I'm writing in things. These are some snowflake ideas and some other things that have to do this particular week. And then on the inside, I have a planning sheet for our home learning. So I have over here I have my 3 boys, because my 4th one's in college and he doesn't need me to plan for him anymore. So I have my 3 boys, I have notes for them. And over here I've actually split the week, and I've assigned each day a theme of its own. So Monday is our nature day. And really what I did is I just looked at how busy are we each day and which day makes sense for us to go out in nature, and which day is good for staying home and getting into a craft project. So I plan these things out here, and then this is just some paperwork for the week. And I think what that allows us to do is to take the big picture and break it down into activities, use your resources, use your ideas, and then have somewhere to plug them in. And then it's a little bit more likely that they're going to happen. And I've said this for years, that all these ideas for the seasons that I come up with, they might seem silly, especially when you explain it to someone who's just not on the same page with you. But for me, it's important. I enjoy the seasonal rhythm and working it into our family life. Years ago, people had to live by the seasons. It was kind of a life or death thing. We don't have to do that anymore, but I think that there's still a lot of value in tapping into the energy of a season and the mood of a season. In the winter, we want to kind of hunker down. We want to, turn to our families and be at home more often. And so I think that really sort of inspires and nourishes us in a way. And then just with the household things, the cleaning and the different things you have to do seasonally also, I think you can tap into that and create some order there for how you're doing your housekeeping at certain times of the year. So anyway, that's kind of in a nutshell how I do my seasonal planning.
Yeah, thanks. Hopefully this is going to stop echoing. We did have one question, and that was, what is the purpose of knowing the moon phases?
Oh, of the moon phases. Well, because sometimes I like to, my boys are fascinated by the moon and by the stars, and we do pay a lot of attention to nature. So the moon phases, they don't actually pay attention to anything but the full moon for the most part. Although if you want to be looking at the stars, it's good to know when the new moon is, or if there's a meteor shower and it's the new moon, you're going to see that meteor shower better. So for me, it's just another piece of information to add that might actually affect how we're doing things that week. But you know, the full moon is fun because a lot of times that's a very seasonal thing. If you look at the Indian and the Native American names for the full moons, they tap right into the seasons. So sometimes, like if it's March and it's the full sap moon, we might spend that week, we might go and do some maple sugaring, that kind of thing.
That's cool. Yeah. You're paying attention to the natural rhythms and working that into your own family.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, and we did have another question about executing the plans, but that's actually a whole point in our outline later. So I'm not skipping that one. I'm postponing it until we talk about that. So Jen, how do you do seasonal or planning in chunks?
Well, I look to Dawn a lot, honestly. She's definitely been an inspiration for me in this area for a very, very long time. And I do it a little bit differently, but only because I think it's just a different approach and different in the terms of how it looks on the plans. It is similar in many ways. We look at the natural seasons, and I look at the liturgical seasons, the seasons of the church year, and that tends to dictate a lot of how I set our plans. In particular, if it's Lent or Advent, or in the older traditional calendar of the church, there's Embertide, which happens quarterly, and I think that's really a lovely way of looking. If you look at Ember on the older calendar, it happened once a quarter of the year, and it was tied to the natural seasons, so it was a time to sort of give thanks for the harvest or pray for the upcoming harvest and that kind of thing. And so I enjoy looking at those and seeing how the church sort of sets us in a natural rhythm in our family, and those tend to dictate my plans more than anything else. So for Lent and Advent, those are naturally penitential times, and those are times that we're generally purging and decluttering and looking at things and considering how these are blessings that we have and we can be grateful for them, but if we're not making the best use of these blessings, if we have a gazillion toys and we're tripping over them and we can't clean up our rooms in 30 minutes or less, then we probably have too many, and we need to pass them along to someone else who can make use of them. So I enjoy using those seasons to sort of follow the church and her natural rhythm and allow my own plans and my own calendar to sort of mirror that as much as possible. So I'm looking at the church calendar, and then I generally look at the natural calendar too, because obviously if it's spring, we're thinking about gardening and gardening chores and different things like that. And I generally just jot down on my calendar my monthly goals, what I want to do, what's seasonal, what's my focus for this month, and then I just kind of incorporate them into my daily plans from there. So I'm kind of flipping back, looking at my monthly goals, and then flipping forward to my week and seeing what can I pencil in where, what fits where in this season. So it's definitely simpler than Dawn's approach, but it is definitely still tied to the seasons, and I think that it's kind of important to allow that to inform some of your planning. It makes sense that, if it's kind of a penitential time, you would be penitential and letting go of things and detaching naturally. So that's kind of how we focus. I was thinking of something when Dawn was talking, and I thought it was really interesting how she was speaking to these little traditions with the lowercase t that she incorporates in her home each year, every year. If you think about it, her oldest son is 20, she's got a 2-year-old, and I think it really speaks to the idea of atmosphere in the home. We're Charlotte Mason educators, and so I'm really big on atmosphere, discipline in life, and I love to think about how atmosphere is created, not so much by thinking, okay, how will I create atmosphere today? It's more in these little things, these ways that we serve our family through scheduling and planning. And I was thinking how lovely it was how she's creating this beautiful, very warm, nurturing atmosphere in her home by repeating these wonderful little traditions every year. And I think that's she's a great example of that and a lot of inspiration there. But I thought it was really interesting to think of how that really serves to facilitate atmosphere in the home.
Thank you very much, Jen. And actually, what I wanted to say, too, is earlier when you were talking about hospitality, what I was thinking is how, all these things that I'm creating for the family at home, sometimes I'll think, boy, this is a whole lot of, busyness of doing this and setting this up. But I hope that what I'm doing is I'm sort of I'm putting my energy as a planner and someone who loves to create a project, or not a party, but a celebration or an observation, and I'm doing that for my family. So it's a nice way to be a hospitality person for your family as well, not just for the entertaining that you do for the rest of the world through the year.
Exactly. You're using those gifts that God has given you, and you're putting them in service to your family. It's a wonderful example.
I like to think that. Thanks.
Yeah, it is. And so I also do planning in chunks of time. I call mine intervals. I don't know why, but I came up with breaking things down when I was doing an interval running program, which I never actually finished. But the program, you run at a high intensity, and then you take a break, and then so you can kind of go farther and grow your capacity and grow your ability by doing this longer, this more intense spurt. But you have to take a break, and a rest is really essential in recovery, and that's when your body actually builds the muscle. So I was kind of using that as a metaphor and seeing if that applied to just life and living out plans and doing things. If you have a chunk of time that's really intense, you have to make sure and put in that rest and recovery period. And I'm just temperament and personality. We were talking a little bit about that before we started recording, and I am not a plodding person. That just do the next thing and keep going little bit by little bit. I think that in the end, that kind of personality does get farther, and that's a great ability or just natural tendency to work with. But I'm definitely that. If it's the hare and the tortoise, I'm much more the hare. And so anytime, I would read articles and you just plod along. Don't let all those project people tell you that you shouldn't be plodding. And I'm like, yeah, but what about the project people? It's like, I can't really become a tortoise. I feel like, I'm being pent up. And so doing it in intervals where it's like, okay, you have a chunk of time where you run, and then a chunk of time where you take a break and you step back and you look at where you were and how far you came and what needs to be done next in a more slower mentality. Mm-hmm. And so that's really worked well for me as a project person, to kind of just have those rhythms of sometimes I'm going, but I know that a rest period is coming, mm-hmm. and to enjoy that. So it's kind of more of a natural rhythm, not like seasonal rhythms, but more like finding out what your internal energy is and kind of matching your plan to how your energy works yourself, if you're different temperament or that sort of thing. So
I think that's really wise and universal, Misty, the idea of sort of high energy and rest. You look, I won't talk about Charlotte Mason the whole time, but she does, in her plans, she does execute, you may read a really intense book, but after that, right, you should schedule something a little bit, maybe a nature walk or something that allows the mind time to rest. If you look at the church's rhythm in the liturgical year, there's always a period of preparing and penitence and quiet and slowing your rhythm down before you would enjoy the feast, because we can't feast all the time. Right. So I think what you're talking about is really universal in this idea of planning in whether it's seasonal planning, especially in seasonal planning, this idea of there's time for rest and there's time for some of these fantastic crafts and good ideas, and so you kind of build that in and work it in naturally. So I like how you describe how that sort of intuitive approach works for you.
Yeah, and I match it up with our school calendar too, because we do mostly year-round. I mean, we take about 4 or 5 weeks off in the summer, but not the entire summer off. We start our school year in July and go do school for 6 weeks and then take a break week and then do school for 6 weeks. So my intervals are 6 weeks. And so that school time is when, because, school is my main responsibility, right, and the main thing where my energy is going. So that's those 6-week chunks are where I have to be focused and doing what's in front of me. And then we have the break week, and that's where I have a lot more time because we're not doing school. So I have more hours. We can go to the park or, do something that we might not have been able to do on a school day. And I can also take some of my morning hours that I would have dedicated to school and actually have some focused planning time, and that's a way for me to recharge. I can read more, those things that are refreshing, there's a time for that. And also a time for catching up on things around the house. So, if some place in the house is really driving me crazy, but it's not imperative to our daily life that it be, dealt with right now, I can say, okay, there's a break week coming up. I have to put it off until then. I can't skip school today so that I can do that. I have to do the school plan. And there is a time coming up where I can tackle all those little tasks that are bothering me right now. Let's see, so I don't know if we have any questions. It looks like primarily the questions are really about executing the plan.
The nitty-gritty.
Although I think something about, I see a little bit of conversation about the tortoise and hare thing, so it might be a good time to take a little detour into the temperament talk. Jen just wrote a great post on planning and temperament, and of course, I love the Myers-Briggs personality type and how that should affect, you should take that under consideration, what your type is, just how you naturally work, to make a plan that fits you and not something that works for someone else and try to just copy someone else. And you want to talk a little bit about temperament?
Sure. I started reading about temperaments a while ago, several years ago. It was kind of helpful to me to begin to consider my own temperament, and as more children came along, and I began to realize that I have this very, kind of have a driven temperament. I will self-identify as a choleric, but I do have little spots of other temperaments thrown in there. But anyway, I began to see my children were very different temperaments, and my manner of dealing with things was not necessarily theirs. So I started to read about this, and I found it interesting, and I found it a really helpful tool in understanding myself and how I naturally worked and approached things, and how my children were different, these different temperaments. My husband is he's pretty much my opposite in temperaments. And if you read about temperaments, you'll find that it's typical for two particular temperaments to be attracted to each other and married. So if you read about that, you could probably find out. You may find this is my temperament, and you can read what the opposite is, and you realize, oh, that's my husband. And there's a reason for that. And as Misty talked about, there are different ways of thinking about this. There's the Myers-Briggs, and there's all these different personality quizzes, and any of those are really great tools, and they all kind of speak to this universal idea that we are given a personality. Sort of the way we work is intuitive. This intuitive way that we approach things, that we process things, how we deal with things, is this temperament, if you will, is something that's God-given. And I really like to encourage people to find what's intuitive to them. We talked just a little bit about this idea in the last talk. What do you say to the mom who might say, I'm very intimidated by your personal planning style? And we kind of addressed it, but I started thinking about it a lot since the last talk, and especially when I was writing the post about temperaments. And I would say it might be because you are a very different temperament than me. So when you look at how I approach planning, or you look at how my plans look, or how we can even talk about how we execute the plans, it's going to be different depending on your temperament. And so it's really important to take anything that we say and share and filter it through this sort of intuitive layer of your personality. So, for example, I talked in the article a little bit about how the different temperaments, and there are 4 of them, choleric, sanguine, melancholic, and phlegmatic, how the different temperaments might approach planning very differently. And Misty was saying that she's really not a plotter. She enjoys the planning. She enjoys looking at it and getting it down, great at big picture. She gets everything down. It looks fantastic. And then when it comes to the plan, or living it, or following through a really long way, not so much. That's not her strength. And so that's an area where she probably has to stretch a lot and really challenge herself to live out more faithfully. And I'm a choleric person, so I'm very driven, highly motivated, pretty organized. I love to get things down on plans. I like to look at big picture and brainstorm them. And then in living them out, I'm pretty, let's go. How do you live out the plan? Well, I just do it. And so that's a very choleric response. The sanguine would have a very highly decorated planner. It would be beautiful. It would be eye candy for us to look at. But then they would maybe have 18 planners for various different things and how they work things out. And they too probably have just struggles with following through. And then the phlegmatics really kind of mellow and laid back. Each of these different temperaments has real gifts, very strong gifts that they bring to planning. And each temperament has weaknesses that we have to overcome. We're not perfect. So just because you look at someone and their particular temperament and you think, oh, that's clearly the ideal temperament for planning. Not necessarily. I'm a great planner, but I have to really struggle and focus and set myself up for success to consider the people and not the plan. That's my struggle, that's my weakness, that's my weak area, whereas a melancholic maybe has a trouble getting a plan down on paper in the first place, but they're so in tune to the relationships and the people around them. So our struggles are very, very different. Christ is the perfection of all four temperaments, so that's our goal. That's what we're working toward. It's helpful when you think of planning, when you watch people or you're listening to us talking about planning or you're looking at our different plans and our examples online, it's helpful to consider and really pray and think about your own temperament, how you would naturally approach things, how you would naturally plan. So if you see an example and you're instantly thinking, that looks great, but I could never do it, then the answer is probably that's not intuitive to you. Find another format. Find another way of getting it down on paper. Find a digital tool that works for you maybe. So think of things in terms of what's intuitive to you. Let ideas go that aren't intuitive because you're probably not going to follow through on them. And consider your temperament in planning, how you would be most likely to approach something and live it out.
Yeah, and what areas you need to stretch in.
Yes.
Too. So you recognize your weak areas and you don't just give in to those and kind of keep them as your little pets, but exactly. Those are the areas that I have to actually stretch. So I can really see where interval planning has been the way that the structure that I use to stretch myself, because I would love to just sit down and make big picture plans and figure out how, make a little time budget of the entire week with all color coded and get it all planned out to the detail, because I'm very much an administrator type. I love doing that kind of the systematizing of things, but then if I had my ideal job, I would be like a school administrator or something, up in charge, making the plans, figuring out the best way to do everything, and then having other people actually
delegating.
do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I saw the article come on last night, Jen, just before I went to bed, and I was so excited about it because I don't think I've planned and planned forever. I've always been a planner, but I've never stopped to think about, well, what is my motivation and how am I planning? And so I'm really excited to read through. I think I might be phlegmatic, but I also resonated with some of the choleric things. Actually, I could see myself in a little bit in each of them.
Yeah, I do too.
And what I love, though, about that is that you broke down the things that we need to stretch ourselves on, because I've always thought of myself as a very strong planner. I love the big picture, but I also love the nitty-gritty. But when I was reading in the parts where you were saying, well, this is where you might need to work on, I love that, because maybe I plan so much I don't stop to think, well, what am I not doing by planning this way? Am I getting carried away? I do tend to get carried away with it. And is the way I'm planning beneficial to my family, which is the most important thing. So I'm very excited to read that. I've started underlining different ideas. It's a fantastic article.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really enjoyed thinking about it and sort of getting it on paper, because it is something that I've thought a lot about. And I think it's helpful on so many levels, especially I know as homeschooling moms, we really enjoy looking around. And this is something I talk about a fair amount. My mom was a homeschooler back when it was pioneering. And there were no blogs. Really, there weren't any catalogs. There weren't websites. There wasn't the internet, period. So you really were challenged to just sort of get down on your knees, pray it out, figure it out, brainstorm it, and go with it. But now we're very blessed. We have all these fantastic resources. We're able to visit with each other live through a chat on a Saturday morning. And that's just a fantastic blessing of technology. One of the drawbacks is homeschooling moms, we look around at all these ideas and we start to compare and we think, oh my goodness, I'm less than, I'm not at this point, my kids are way behind. And so I think that that's actually pretty poisonous and not healthy at all. And one of the tools that really kind of maybe help you balance the way that you're looking around at other people and gathering ideas is knowing your temperament, and knowing that if you're someone that tends to inspect and compare and turn over again and again and again, maybe if you have perfectionist tendencies, this would be an area that you might have to guard a little bit more than someone else who would very easily look around and say, okay, that's not for me, click, and moving away. So it is a really helpful tool. It's very helpful. It's great in understanding yourself, knowing yourself, so that you can begin to put in place, when we talk about executing this plan, how do we live it out? You filter it through this temperament or your particular personality type.
Mm-hmm.
Great point.
Yeah, so with the interval planning, then that's one of the ways that I stretch myself, because I have this 6-week chunk, and like, this is to do your plan. You made your plan, you know it's good, because whenever I would sit down, I'm like, okay, this isn't working, I need a new plan. Scrap that. I'm going to make the new best plan.
Right.
And I get it all sketched out, and then I look at it, and it's like, oh, that's almost exactly the same thing.
I was actually thinking of that when you were talking about it, Misty. You're sort of taking this idea of, you know, maybe rewarding yourself. It's it's the carrot that you're just kind of taking your personality into consideration, and you realize, okay, well, I know I have to get through these 6 weeks, and at the end of them, I'm going to give myself permission now to really inspect my plans and redo them and make them work and fit. And so I think that's a fantastic way of doing that. I like to live out the plan, but I have to challenge myself to get to the end of the day, maybe with a glass of wine or a little bit of chocolate or something like that. So use what works for you to kind of motivate you to get through it and live it out. Everyone has a different carrot that they need to put in front of themselves to plod through the daily grind.
Yep. So I try not to let myself, you know, redo the plan or go through until that break week. So I have to actually, I'm like, okay, it's only been one bad day. That does not mean I can scrap the plan. I can't scrap the plan.
Good, very good.
Right. I have to try it. So that's worked pretty well for me.
That's great.
So we have 2 questions here, and they kind of transition us into the next point, which is the execution. What type of systems do you create so that your interval or seasonal plans actually get executed? I find I'm doing a good job with the interval plans, but not so great actually getting the goals or habits executed. Would it be part of a weekly review? And then another question, I strive to plan well, but in the end, I tend to just go get stuff done and write it down after the fact. Can you speak to that?
Okay.
Yeah, I just said something on my Facebook page for my blog the other day about how sometimes I go back in and write things that I hadn't written down earlier just so I can check them off, because that makes me feel really good. Yeah, I think that's a real challenge, is going from this big picture into making it happen. And, you know, I think all of us use a planner of some sort, and that for me is my biggest tool. I've also talked about how I think that it's a great idea to really treat what we're doing as important and schedule a lot of review time for yourself. So I like to call it my office hours. And I built those into my schedule. Just like I looked at the week and I decided, okay, so this day would be a great day to go out and do nature study because of the way our schedule is that day. I look at the week and I say, where's the day where I can look at next week and I can start taking some of those ideas and actions and funnel them into our actual schedule. So for me, I use my file crate for organizing some things. And I have a planner that I just actually made for myself, because I'm one of those people that I do tend to switch planners too often. But I think that, you know, definitely looking at the framework of your week. For me, it's a week. I like to look at the week and deciding where can you get some things done. And it's sort of like playing to your strengths. Where is your schedule going to allow for certain things to happen? So when is it a good time during your day to do the housekeeping? And when is it a good time for both you and your children to do the reading or the math, those types of things? When do you meal plan? So I try to take, and this is sort of the big picture thing again, because I did this with, I have a post where I did my housekeeping and household planning, and I wrote everything out, absolutely everything from room by room to all the tasks that it takes to get dinner on the table and get the groceries in the house. And I took all of those individual tasks, and then I figured out where they would fit best into the month and the weeks, and getting those, planned that way. So for me, it's a planner, and it's for taking time to use the planner. That's sort of just a very simplistic answer to that question, but we can get into more nitty-gritty too.
So then so once a week you have kind of a weekly, you look over your next week and you renegotiate some of those times, like when you're going to do housework, and so that's not the same every week. You're kind of looking at the next week and looking at the potential for just next week.
Yeah, I check in a lot. I have to check in a lot because I like to do a lot of pre-planning. So like if I'm looking at, now remember I just started this planner, so it's still in its early stages, but I like to, plan out as much as possible. What I was going to say with that housekeeping calendar that I did, because I'm not a neatnik, but let's face it, we all have a house to keep clean, and it makes our lives easier when we're getting these things done. So I like to treat them with respect and as important, and I get them planned. So, I created this housekeeping calendar for myself that basically tells me on Mondays we're doing these chores, or we are doing these chores, and I write them in underneath each day with little check boxes. But for me, what I like to do is get things planned as much as possible ahead of time. And so, for instance, with my seasonal planning, I like to do that in the third weekend of 1 month, 2 months ahead of time. That probably sounds really confusing right then, but my point is that I have to actually write in my planner on the family calendar, Mom is going to be planning this weekend, and then look ahead. But during the week, what I like to do is I have it scheduled that on Wednesdays when I clean my kitchen, I start the meal plan for the next week. So I look at the next week and I see what we have in our pantry and what I just threw out from the refrigerator. And then on Thursday, that's really the day that I like to look at the following week, because it's going to give me enough time over the weekend if there are things that we're going to need or I want to have for next week. And then I do some more planning over the weekend when I can get that office hour. So I think, I plan in little increments, but I actually have them written into my planner to sit down and do that. Because, yeah, you are adjusting your week. I might have, things set a certain way, but then a day gets busy and you have to readjust. So that's sort of how I do it there.
Mm-hmm. And Jen, how about you? You just get it done, right?
Exactly. There is a little bit more to it than that for me. I would say, first of all, if you're having trouble accomplishing the plan or feeling like you're getting anywhere, maybe take a look at how realistic you're making your plans. Right. I could make a list 8 miles long, and it may even go on longer than that. But if I'm realistic about my day, I might be able to get 3 or 4 things done outside of my primary vocation, which is home education, which takes a fair chunk of my day, and then mothering the family and continuing to be a part of the family, cooking and those sort of things. So first of all, be realistic. Be brutally realistic with yourself. If you need help with that, your husband's probably a great person, because mine can cut right through and say, well, this list looks really great, Jen, but we could maybe get that done in about 20 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And like Dawn, I have to make an appointment with myself. We're always serving, which is great and good. That's an objective good, but we also have to consider that we have to make time for ourselves to sit down and consider this so that we can steward the time, as we were talking about, really kind of manage time very well. So I like to get up early in the morning before my kids, which is a challenge because I'm actually not a morning person, but my kids made me be. There's a little personal mortification story for you right there. So I like to get up earlier than the kids with my cup of coffee, say my morning prayers, and sit down with my planner and take a look at it. And I don't spend a ton of time here. Most of my time is maybe on a Sunday afternoon, putting things on my planner, listing things out, reviewing my monthly checklist. The daily part is 5 to 10 minutes, taking a look at my planner, considering my day. And I work in blocks and lists, 2 different tools. So I don't know if this is going to show up at all. It may not. I may have to take a picture and put it on my blog because it's kind of shiny and reflective. But anyway, this is just like a little tab to bookmark, and it fits in my planner. It snaps in, and it has my blocks. And that's easy for you to think about. You could do this in 15 minutes, ladies. Sit down with a piece of paper and think of your day from beginning to end. You wake up, and my first morning block, for example, is 6 to 9 a.m., and I just call it a morning block. Don't list what you do. Just think of a chunk of time. So if you think of your days in chunks of time, I bet you could come up with some blocks. You're doing school in part of the day, or if you're not a homeschooler, maybe you're taking the kids to school, and this is a time where you run errands. So think of your day in blocks and list it out, and keep it near your planner, because that's
and not 15-minute blocks.
No. These blocks should be at least an hour long. If you have more than 10 blocks, you need to consolidate and think in terms of chunks of time. You're moving through your day in chunks of time. And maybe think of pegs in your day: breakfast, lunch, dinner, evening prayers. My favorite block of time is the remains of the day, which is after the kids go to bed. So I have these blocks listed. I keep them near my planner, and I'm the kind of gal that I like to have everything in one book. So I keep my personal goals, household checklists, the seasonal plans, my monthly goals, all of those things in the same book. It's easy for me to keep it all together, and I'm juggling enough. I need it all in one place. So I look at my blocks of time on one side of my planner, and I think of my day over here on this side of my planner, and I see if I've got an appointment. Then obviously I'm not going to be able to schedule too much. That speaks to reality. But maybe my day's really quiet at home, and I can look at my monthly goals list, and maybe today's the day I clean out my closet, and I write it on my planner, and I realize that's a big chunk of time. So I'm not going to schedule 4 other mini events in my day, because realistically I'm not going to get them done. So that's how I schedule, kind of monthly and day to day. And then living it out, after you've done that little morning review, like Dawn, I keep my planner right open, and I check in frequently. I'm walking past, I look in, maybe I can check something off. I'm guilty of writing down something just that I've already done so I can check it off too. Makes me feel good. That's fine.
It's a record.
It is a record. And so you go through and check those things off on a daily basis, and then at the end of the week, usually Sunday afternoons, because mainly that's the time I can nail down my teens and talk to them about what's going on with their schedule. I go through and I consider the week anew. So, and that's how.
Did we lose her?
Uh-oh.
Did we lose Jen?
Yeah, I think we did.
Oh, no.
I think she should be able to get back in if she re-clicks the link, but sometimes when that happens, you have to restart.
You have in terms of your tree time.
I guess that was just residual. I think she's gone.
Okay.
We have some questions about.
Sorry, I dropped out.
Oh, there you go. You're back. Yay.
Yes.
Sorry.
Oh.
Maybe. Okay, so we had some questions about like how this works in different phases of life, because someone's asking about how is execution affected when you're pregnant and breastfeeding and your babies and toddlers and that kind of season of life. Yeah. And then also people saying would like insight on teenagers and executing the schedule. I don't have teenagers yet, but I spent a lot of years, mine are all around 2-ish years apart, and so there's like when you're pregnant and you have a toddler, or you have a newborn and you're potty training and all these things, and I think we just have to realize that during those times we don't have the same energy as we do when we're not pregnant, or when we aren't potty training or having a toddler that's getting into everything all the time. Yeah. that really affects the amount that we can do. Yeah. and our expectations. And the more little people that there are, that's your hospitality, that's your job, and that's all you might get done, and that's okay.
Yes.
That you can't really add on maybe organizing the closets or doing anything else, really. That is your focus and your job right now, and that's all the energy that you have, and that's okay.
I agree, absolutely. I just had a baby 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now, and so I found myself remembering just what it's like to be in that season of life. And here I was in the heyday of my planning with older kids thinking, woohoo, I'm getting all kinds of stuff done. And then we moved at the same time. So we had a year where we moved to a new house, I had a baby, and we sent our oldest son off to college. So that was like the perfect storm there. That was that was kind of difficult for someone like me who has created all these plans and I really want to go forward with them. But what a lesson, like you said, as far as the hospitality and serving. Wait a minute here. What's most important? This baby has needs. My son has needs. My family has needs. Our household has needs. So it was a real lesson in letting go and stepping back from a lot of the plans I put so much effort into. And you were saying about, like, with the teenagers, one thing I wanted to mention, and Jen was saying about the office hours on Sunday and talking to your family, your teens, that's something that we've always sort of done informally. And then this year I said to the boys and my husband, on Sundays we're having a family meeting now. Every week, a formal thing, we're sitting down. I actually have a notebook that I started specifically for this, and we have an agenda for each week, and we go over the family calendar. I talk to each of them about the week ahead, what's on your mind, what's on your plate, what's coming up, and here are the things that we need to be aware of. What are some of the issues that need to be addressed, and I write it in the book. And then what I've been doing too is roundabouts Thursday, I check back in and I say, now remember, for one of my sons, you were going to come up with a different hobby than video gaming to talk about on Sunday. Remember, we said we wanted you to think about something else that will fill your time. Have you thought about that? Because on Sunday, we're going to be asking you about that. Or we were also discussing as a family, coming up with where we want to really save our money and donate to next year as a family. So everyone was doing their own research to bring back to the meeting on Sunday. And so roundabouts Thursday, I reminded everybody, are you thinking about that? Because we're going to sit down and do that. And we've added in, which is nice, is I take a little slip of paper and I have everybody write down something nice that happened that week, something they were either grateful for or that just made them happy. And we pop it in a little jar that's titled Blessings. And we'll read those next New Year's Eve as a family. So that's something I threw in there. But we were talking, Jen, about the seasons of life and how, you can go from, one of the questions had to do with how do you let go of things when you have a toddler or a baby or some nursing. There are things that, take precedence over the plan that we've so meticulously outlined. Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can, yes.
Sorry, my computer was busy and I had to talk to my kids about using the internet. I think it is actually really important to consider sort of your season of life, just as much as it is, if not more so, your temperament. If you're pregnant, particularly in the beginning of a pregnancy and you're very sick, obviously you can't do the same things that you could do when you were not and your kids were older. And so this is definitely a consideration in my planning, and I have no problem dialing back and giving myself permission to live out what is the season of life that I'm in, because those are actually God's plans, not mine. So I can't overwrite those. I have to work with them. And typically there are so many lessons in those plans that you actually can't plan for, you can't anticipate. For example, what if this is a season of suffering for your family and you're living that out, and that means that your house is not as clean and your books are not as organized, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the lessons in that season of suffering for you and for your children are so much more valuable, supernaturally speaking, than anything else that you could have put on your plans. So that season of life that you're living, those are God's plans, and that's up here in your plans. You can try to circumvent them, but it won't work out.
Right.
So live those plans, live out the season of life that you're given joyfully. and embrace it and work with it. Some seasons are going to be very, very productive, like Misty was talking about, those interval times. Some will be very, very productive. Be diligent and efficient and get as much as you can done in those times, because there are going to be these times that you may not be as efficient, which also maybe speaks to the idea of, when you have a plan, a realistic plan, something that works for you, written down on paper or somewhere. I found that one of the things that was most valuable in one of my last pregnancy was having a plan and a routine in place.
Uh-oh.
Run with.
Is she?
Oops, and I was muted.
I should have been saying something.
Yes, my 2-year-old or 3-year-old had to come in and tell me it's snowing.
It's
Oh,
snowing.
wow.
It's snowing here too. I don't know if you can see it out my window behind me, but it's snowing here.
Wow, I'll have to live vicariously through you. There's no snow in Alabama.
All right, Jen. So you were cut off right where you were
Right.
going to say the most important thing.
Tell me what I was talking. Oh, living out the season and the supernatural value of it. I have no idea. I cut out.
Oh.
Oh, it's
Can you
still
hear me?
iffy. Still coming in and out.
I don't know what's wrong with my connection. Sorry.
Oh boy. We can see her.
Yeah, and the next question is also for Jen and the digital planning tool she uses with her teens.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, so I use Cozy a lot.
Okay, good. Oh, I think you're back.
Okay. So did you hear the last answer? I said I use Cozy. It's an app. It's a free app. You can pay to upgrade if you want to. But I have my teens install it on their smartphones, and I can keep to-do lists. I can keep lists for the grocery store. So my teen might ask, what can I pick up on the way home, Mom? And it's on the list. My husband uses it, and there's a calendar associated with it as well. And that's one of my favorite digital apps, honestly. It keeps kind of the whole family connected. So if you use smartphones and you use technology, you can even use it on your desktop. You don't have to have a smartphone to use it. That's actually one of my favorite apps.
So you cut off where you were talking about making a plan during pregnancy, and one of the things that was important to keep in mind, and then you left.
It's to keep in mind that that's actually God's plan. So when we have these seasons of suffering, or you're pregnant, or you're taking care of an aging parent, or you have lots of children under the age of 8, that's God's plan for you. That's where He's kind of written the line right here. And our plans have to filter down from that, and in reality, in realistic terms. So you can't circumvent God's plans. You can't go around them, and you can't trump them with your own plans. So your season of life is where you are. You have to live it, and your plans have to reflect it. So you have to give yourself permission to embrace whatever the supernatural lessons are for you in that season of life, and plan with that in mind, which may mean putting one to-do thing down on your planner a day. And that one thing might look like, get my spiritual reading done for the day. It would not be dust the baseboards during that season of life. So it has to, planning with the season of life in mind is a necessity, and it has to be based in reality.
Mm-hmm. Or even for a time where I think it might have been where I was nursing, or one of those kind of exhausted sort of times, but we still had to homeschool and get stuff done.
Right.
But I was tired in the morning, but felt like we had to get going in the morning. And one of the things that I put on my list was smile at each child first thing, when they come down in the morning, smile into their eyes and say good morning.
Right.
That was what I put on my to-do list.
Yeah, you have to switch your focus a little bit. I think that, Jen, what you were saying too about there are such lessons that we get from these times. Because for myself, I was talking earlier when you were off that, a few years ago, I had a baby and we moved, and my son went to college, but also one of our other sons, who's autistic, developed a seizure disorder. And that really, the the way I was homeschooling him changed so much that year, and we had to just take such a step back, and I had to go from, you know, having all my plans to really just working around his energy and his mood, and it was such a lesson for me because I just thought, I can't be disappointed. This is what it is, and God has a purpose in this, and I have grown so much as a mother through the experiences with my son who's autistic in a way that I don't think I would have had this not come to be, and it's really challenging, but I've learned to, or I'm trying to every day learn to embrace that challenge and learn from it, grow in my patience and grow in my energy and find my energy where I can and balance a little bit better. And I think that's why the planning is so important to me, because I am juggling such important, precious plates here. Each one of my children are relying on me to, first of all, model a sense of joy and respect for each other.
That's exactly right.
You know, where everybody is. I have my seasons, but so do my kids and what they all have for needs. So that's where my planning, I guess, stems from. That just sort of popped into my head, and I wanted to share that just then. But
yeah, no, I think that's a great example, Dawn. We have to, we can give our kids permission to do things, but we forget that we have to give ourselves permission sometimes. So you get stuck in the season, and maybe you already had your plans already outlined, and they were up here, and you are way down here. So you maybe get in the habit of giving yourself permission to say, okay, well, I recognize this is where you want me to be, Lord. So my plans are going to have to come down here. This is where you put me, and this is where the value is.
Exactly. Revising what you thought was going to happen or what you saw, just changing it a little bit, being a little more flexible. Our homeschooling is so different. I homeschooled my first two very similarly, and then my third one came along, and that all went out the window. Right. You know, I'm trying to use Story of the World with him, but we're doing it a lot differently than we did in the first two, and that's okay. And there's a lot of beauty that we've been finding in this. So I think a lot of it's attitude and perspective.
Definitely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's 8 o'clock. It's been an hour, which is difficult to believe, but we have one more question that I think would be good to end with, and I think that what Dawn was saying about how she plans her week and looks forward, I think her perspective here is going to address this question. The question is, do you have any tips for executing a weekly plan when your family doesn't have a normal week? Her husband has floating days off, so sometimes her weekend is midweek and her weekend is work time. So things like regular schedules, regular cleaning schedules, or regular routines don't work.
Yeah, that's tough because, like I've been talking about, I really like taking my week and seeing the pegs, like Jen was saying, where can I put these certain things? And if you're having a week where things aren't happening that way, it can be hard to establish a rhythm. And I think, you know, for myself, with the different things that are happening in my household, that happens a lot for me. And my husband's been getting some days off here and there. That's a tough thing. I think that you definitely want to be planning just before your week begins. So you can do some pre-planning and you can have your big picture, but you're going to want to, you know, maybe right before the week begins, look at what's coming up, and just as best as you can, see where you're going to have some time to do the things. Figure out, I think also what's important is probably an important thing to do, is figuring out what your priorities are, because those are the things you're going to want to fit into the times that you have first and foremost. Maybe, you know, involving your family a little bit more. That's a tough thing because I'm very much about rhythm and about, you know, I like my Mondays to look like this and I like my Tuesdays to look like this. And it would drive me a little bit nuts having it be up and down. But I think that maybe just revisiting it a little closer to the week itself, if you can on a Sunday or whatever day works for you. You know, Sunday's my day, but find a day during the week where you sit and you look at what's coming up and as best as possible work your plans in around the energies and the activities that you have set for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe like you say, okay, every week I have one, you know, day where I do more cleaning, or 4 days where we have to really hit the homeschooling, and then just kind of pay. Those might be different days of the week, but you know,
exactly.
This day's going to be this one. This one's going to be this one.
Right.
As long as you get those days in, the order isn't as important.
And what's important each day too. There are certain things that need to happen each day, but like you said, you know what needs to happen for the different days, and then just figure out where that fits this week.
Mm-hmm.
It might be helpful even to make a grid just on a piece of paper, and instead of thinking of your grid as Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and so on, you think in terms of those blocks I was kind of talking about, those chunks of time. So you know that you have chunks of time where you're going to be homeschooling. You know you have chunks of time where your husband's going to be home, and so on and so on. So think of it as a week, the weekly chunks that you encounter in your week, and write those down and make a little square around them on your little grid on your paper, and start to fill in what you would like to get done. So I can get very different things done when my husband is home than when he's not home.
Yeah.
And so you maybe fill in those chunks of time on your little sheet of paper, and that's your master planning grid. It's not based on Monday I'm going to get this done, or on Tuesday I'm going to get this done. This is what happens in this chunk of time. And then as you plan out your week, you talk with your husband, you realize, okay, he's going to be home on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week, so you can kind of start to fill in your plan now based on when he's home, when he's around, what you're doing on these other days, and your week starts to trickle out that way. So maybe it's just thinking of time in a different way.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's good. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for chatting with me today, and for everyone for joining. This has been a lot of fun, and I hope helpful for everyone. It's always fun to talk planning.
Yes, thank you so much, Misty and Jen. This was so much fun. What a great way to start my day. Thank you. And everybody.
Thank you.
All right, have a great Saturday.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.